You are now listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc, sharing insights through real, honest, and practical ways to improve your communication and relationships. Featuring your hosts, Dr. Pamela Kreiser, Meredith Edwards-Nagel, and Teighlor Polindo.
We have a great AFAF Rewind for you this week. What do we got, Teighlor?
This episode we're looking at two, actually, because it was so good we couldn't cut it down to one. We are with one of our very dear friends, Staci Ross. She's a therapist who talks from her professional experience, but also her personal experience with gaslighting. And it's a term we've heard thrown around culturally in conversation. Oh, don't gaslight me. But what is it actually? It's actually an intricate, harmful form of abuse. It's important to know if you are being gaslit, look with us as we look at the strategies and hope to empower each other to get out of such a negative situation.
There's a little bit of a difference between a manipulator and then the person who's gaslighting. Gaslighting is almost like the extreme actions of a manipulator. So let's be honest, we all have capacity to be a little manipulative.
Sure.
Right? I mean, it could be very small things. I think about things like trying to get my kids to do stuff. Mm-hmm. And I might be like incentivizing them, but it's a little bit of manipulation on some level, right? Mm-hmm. But it's with a good heart. I'm not really trying to be cruel or evil or break them down. Mm-hmm. So we can all think of examples maybe where we've done that. But with gaslighting, it's a systemic attempt by one person to basically break down another person mentally. It's like psychological warfare. It's really abuse, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. But it mimics the same kind of techniques you would see in psychological warfare, where there's manipulation in a sense where you are being hostile or you're playing with their mind in a way that they, like the intro says, where they start to second guess themselves. And that's very different. That's actually, I feel like, not just psychological warfare, but warfare of someone's soul. Because when they come in to finally see me for help, their soul is broken. And I don't mean to say they are broken, but there's a sense in them that they don't even trust themselves anymore. They don't really know what's right and wrong. There's such a sense of shame.
It gave me the chills.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Totally relate with that. Yeah.
It's a painful feeling.
So you're describing then we have manipulation on one end of the continuum and gaslighting on the other, and there's kind of degrees or?
Well, no, what I would say is those diagnoses that I was sharing with you, if we just put them all under sort of a manipulator, someone who's lacking empathy, the gaslighting is the action of the manipulator.
Okay.
So you have to kind of understand who is a manipulator. Why are they the way that they are? Most people who fall into the categories of those personality disorders, which by the way, are very difficult to treat. We've got two different axes in the diagnostic manual. Axis 1 and Axis 2. And Axis 1s are like depression and things that you could even medicate, so to speak. But the personality disorders, there's no medication for that. Mm-hmm. And there has to be a willingness for someone to want to change. And if they don't have the ability to access that, and part of the reason they don't is there's entitlement, and there's also a very fragile sense of themselves. A lot of bravado, but truthfully inside they are very broken themselves and they don't know how to deal with that. They don't have the capacity, so they turn it outward.
So does a gaslighter know they're doing it, or do they do it unconsciously, or do you gaslight consciously?
Yeah.
A manipulator by nature, that is their nature to do the things that they do. When they gaslight, that's very intentional. They know what they're doing. That's actually a hallmark of the process. Their intent is to break somebody down. Let's just say you're someone operating in the world like we all do, and you haven't actually met this gaslighter yet, but you're like, how do I make sure I don't get caught up in something like that? Would that be a better question to answer maybe?
Yeah. How can you see it coming almost,
Yeah. So there's a couple really big red flags. If you meet somebody and they share too much too soon, if they share really, really intimate things about themselves in the very early stages of a relationship, that is a big red flag. You need to be very careful. That falls more under borderline personality, but nevertheless, that's a manipulator because they're looking for your sympathy and your pity. That's not how a relationship works. Think about a really healthy relationship you have with one of your friends. you lean on each other, right? I always think of it like a seesaw. When one's down, maybe the other one's up, so they could be that support system. And then eventually it tilts the other way, right? That's healthy. That's normal. And sometimes you're both down, but not often. But the point being is it moves back and forth, and you are more than willing to be the person to support that person. Okay. So that's not the case with the red flags. If someone's coming in and they're giving you all their private information and they're saying things like, wow, no one's really ever understood me like you understand me. That feels good to hear, but that's just manipulation. Think about that. That's one of them. The other one is if you find yourself pitying someone who actually continues to hurt you.
Yeah.
I've been guilty of that.
Yeah.
Especially when it's a family member, because there's confusion around that. You've had relationships with these people for years, and it can really play with your brain.
Yeah.
But that's another sign. If they continue to want your sympathy and pity, but then they also turn around and hurt you again, that doesn't work.
That's a good point.
So, you know how we were talking about these catchphrases, you're too sensitive, or wow, you're really emotional, or I was just joking. That's a big one.
Yeah.
And I'll share an example with you on a personal level, if I may, how that particular phrase was when I finally realized I was being gaslighted by my brother. Just a quick background. I had cancer in my 20s. And in my 40s, there was a pretty big falling out with my family between my husband and my brother. And one of the things to triangulate my mom into feel sorry for him and take his side, because I stood up to him, and I won't bore you with all the details, but I stood up to what he was doing wrong. He didn't like it. And he did all the things I talked about, the anger, the antisocial behavior, the bullying, the yelling, all those kind of things. And I've never had anyone talk to me like that before. And it was like, well, that's not okay. I don't care if you're my family member. But anyway, what he had said to my mother and my dad was that he wished that I had died when I had cancer.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty brutal, right?
That's wrong.
Totally wrong. I don't care if you might feel it, you might think it. Do you say it to your own parents about their other child? No. Total boundary crossing. It got back to me. Of course, he said, I was just kidding. You don't know how to take a joke. But the worst part of it was that my mother said the same thing. That he was just kidding. You don't know how to take a joke. And that's another red flag, my friends, is that when you get another person, and a lot of times in families, siblings will do this. They'll try to pull one parent in to go against the other sibling. But when another person, an AFAF, because that's what my mom hates, I don't mean to put labels on, but if we're looking at that dynamic, that's who she became. He hooked her in, she bought whatever story he was telling her, and that's what they came back with. And it was like, whoa, that was my first aha moment. Because when you're in a relationship with a family for many years, you put up with a lot of things. Oh, that's just how that person acts. Or we make a lot of excuses for them. Same with spouses sometimes too, or your children or what have you. But in terms of that family dynamic, it's, well, this was my first playmate when I was little. We grew up, we have these relationships. And then you become adults and you start to think, wow, I wouldn't treat somebody else like that. Why am I letting someone treat me like that? And it's important to do that self-reflection.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Once again, that's Gaslighting, episodes 23 and 24. Their title is AF with Staci Ross on how to identify gaslighting.
Once again, thank you for joining us today. Please remember to rate, share, and subscribe to our podcast. And thank you for listening to Asking for a Friend.
Let us know what you thought of the episode. Our email is hello@afafpodcast.com. This show is for educational purposes only and is copyrighted. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. Thanks for listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc.